Hi there. The latest story that are making headlines is that Niger and China have signed a crude oil MOU worth about 400 million US dollars. Now, you have to understand this is not the total cost of the deal. This just alone advance because the military leadership in Niger right now need the money to finance and fund their budget. And as you know, last year Niger had a coup or thereabout, right? And they started kicking out the French interest. And as you also know, is that France has been, controlling that territory since even before they got independence, right? As their colonial master, and after the independence, they started coming up with methods of controlling those former French colonies through colonial taxes, and after that, issuing a certain currency that they still use called the CFA franc that is printed in France. And all these countries are required to have all their, foreign currency and gold deposited in the French National Reserve or the French Central Bank. So that's what has been going on, and France has had massive influence in these countries until they started now having these coups to try to kick out the French interest from these countries. And Niger is one of those countries. That is Mali, Niger, Burkina Faso, and Guinea. All those countries are trying to do the same thing, but France is still a strong, adversary to this new democratic alliance, right? So now what is happening here is that Niger discovered oil deposits at a region or that at a place called the Agadem Basin. And this Agadem Basin, if you look at the Nigerian map, the basin itself is larger than the country of Togo. It's huge. And now there's the oil fields there that the Chinese have developed. And then they've constructed a pipeline from there to Benin. And this is a deal between the two countries because Benin is supposed to earn transit fees, as you can see from this map. I'm trying to show you the map. So this is Niger, Agadem Rift, or rather basin, and then we have the blue, that is the size of the basin. And I was saying, if you took Togo and you went and just supposed Togo on top of that basin, it's almost the size of Togo. It's huge. And the pipeline leaves the fields in Agadem and it goes through Benin. Of course, the other route would have been through Nigeria, but as you know, Nigeria is not stable, and the rebels and terrorists in the north would cut off this pipeline and try to siphon the oil. So there's that. And then Nigeria, it would still have gone through Cameroon, which is a longer route. So the other alternative would have been through the north, through Libya. And as you know, Niger and Libya, they don't have that friendship. So the only option was through Benin. And the pipeline is complete. As I'm making this video right now, the pipeline is complete. As you can see from this photo, this is the time 2 years ago when the Chinese were nearing the completion. This is the territory near the Atlantic coast in Benin. That's when the photo was taken. So the pipeline is complete. Everything have been paid for. Now the MOE is in place, but France, because of what happened to them in Niger, and they are still now in Benin. France still controls Benin. The Benin government is still a puppet of the French government. So France has ordered Benin to stop the flow of the crude oil from the Agadem Rift to the port of Seme, which is on the Atlantic. So that is also what is happening today. If you go to online and you type Niger Benin, you'll see a lot of articles talking about it, and it's because of France. France doesn't want Niger to export their crude oil because they were kicked out of Niger, and they were kicked out of Mali, and they were also kicked out of Burkina Faso, but they still have the grudge. They're also accusing Russia of being behind this, though we know that's not the case, because again, these countries, after kicking out the French troops and the French influence in their country, they get scared that France might try to come back again. So That's when they go to Russia to request that they get these mercenaries called Wagner. And that's now the issue. France is trying to now say that Russia is inciting African countries to try to break away from the yoke of the French influence. And you know the story, basically. So that's what is happening. Now, the story goes, now this current story, right, is that Niger has signed an MOU, that is a memorandum of understanding, with Chinese state-owned oil giant China National Petroleum Corp, also known as CNPC, worth $400 million, linked to the sale of crude oil from its Agadem field. So it's a loan, basically, but now they're saying they're going to pay it back through the sale of that crude oil to China, right? And that is the story. So it's a loan. I wanted to look for the word. It's a loan to the military leadership in Niger because they really need this money to finance the budget. As you know, before the coup, the civilian government was surviving from handouts, French aid and the United States aid. They were not, that's how they were financing their budget. Now, after they were kicked out, the military junta doesn't, qualify for that aid or the French assistance. So that's why they are looking for other alternative to get their budget running. One of the alternative is to agree with the countries like China to advance them loans in exchange for the minerals. Don't forget, Niger is also a leader in uranium export. They contribute 65% of uranium in the world, and most of that used to go to France. And I think now China is ramping up the uranium export from Niger. Remember, also China exports uranium from Namibia, and they paid them $4 billion in the last 3 years for that uranium. So it's a lot of money they are paying for the uranium. So if they start buying uranium from Niger, they're going to get a lot of money, which they were not getting from the French, because from what I read is that the French actually were stealing this uranium, right? They were stealing this uranium from Niger and not paying equivalent of what they were supposed to pay. And that's the story. Now, I don't know. What do you think? Do you think that the fighting between, according to Bloomberg, the fighting between or the conflict between Niger and Benin border is because France is inciting Benin to try to block Chinese oil export through their territory? Because that's what I think. Personally, that's what I think. So let's discuss in the comment section below and get to understand what is really happening.